everybody, this is the Wikstrand. Today we're going to take a look at a movie, and not just any movie. A movie that if you would search the word immortal classic American blockbuster, you would probably find a picture of the fantastic grand poster that carries this movie. Throughout the years, Gone with the Wind has been called a lot of things, a masterpiece. It has been criticized for its depiction of slavery, and it has been called a advocate for domestic rape or whatever you want to talk about. But it is a movie that endures throughout the decades. And now it is my task to try to tell you what I think about this movie. So buckle up, because we have a lot to talk about, because this movie, it's big. It's really monstrosity big. This is my review of Gone with the Wind. Scarlett O'Hara, played by Vivien Leigh, is a Southern belle in Georgia. It's 1861, and soon the Civil War is going to break out. But this doesn't concern her. She's more concerned with the fact that Ashley, a man that she wants for her husband, apparently wants to marry Melanie Hamilton, played by Olivia de Havilland, a woman that she does not have a lot in common with. We'll get to that in a second. But she goes to, the barbecue at 12 Oaks in order to try to persuade him to not marry Hamilton. She goes there, and they're talking about the upcoming war, and everybody's very excited about it. They're thinking that they're gonna beat the North in a matter of months, a little bit like what they speculated that the First World War was going to turn out like. On this party where lots of men is courting her, but she refuses them, and when it turns out that Ashley actually is going to marry Hamilton, she becomes a little bit miffed with the whole thing. But she also at this party met Rhett Butler, played by Clark Gable, a man with a questionable past and seems to be about as self-centered as she is. And here we basically have our main characters that we're going to follow throughout this big epic surrounding what's going to happen at 12 Oaks and at Tara, the place that Scarlett grows up in. She's the daughter of this, big plantation owner. And what's going to happen, once the tide of the war is turning and the South eventually will lose? That's what we're gonna find out about this movie. Now, I will say this. One of the problems this movie has, and that's maybe by design, is it's difficult to find any form of sympathy for Scarlett O'Hara whatsoever. She complains all the time, and when she doesn't get what she wants, she basically marries people out of spite or because of necessity, and she's very self-driven and egotistical. And the fact is that it is a difficult role for Vivien Leigh to play, and she does it amazingly, but still it is a difficult character to get attached to. It's not impossible to have movies with unpleasant characters that you can attach yourself to, but this is one of the cases where I think it didn't quite work. At the same time, you can say basically the same thing about Butler. Clark Gable is an absolute douche to most people, even though I always found him to be a little more reasonable than Scarlett. And then of course we have Hamilton herself. Olivia de Havilland's character has got to be one of the most nicest, self-sacrificing characters in movie history. She always puts everybody in front of herself, and she always thinks the best thing about everybody. It is difficult not to think that she's a little bit too much of a do-gooder, but I guess we cannot have any happy middle. We have to have these very two opposite characters in this movie for this big, grand, epic movie to work. And of course, Butler is probably the character that drives this movie forward the most. And aside from them, we have a very rich tapestry of characters that will come and go, and some will stay for a long time, and some is just here for a fleeting moments and then they're gone. Now, let's talk about some of the things I really liked about this movie. The visuals of this is so incredible. The sequence, when General Sherman has destroyed Atlanta, and we see all the dead and wounded soldiers in the square, and the panoramic shot that they got from that, the escape from Atlanta, and the silhouettes against the burning city, and the silhouette against the, you know, night sky, and all of these sequences, they look just so amazing. I get goosebumps just by talking about them. They are etched into cinema history. Some of the most impressive shots that you will ever see, ever. And our characters do learn stuff from each other, and, you know, maybe this wasn't such a bad movie after all, I thought. But then I thought, hey, wait a minute, we still have 2 more hours of this movie, because then we move on from the first section of the movie, which is basically this show about, you know, the honorable defeat that the South was, and you know, the last age of gallantry that is, you know, going to be killed by history and all that stuff, to the things that happens after the Civil War with the carpetbaggers and the political meeting, which is basically a Ku Klux Klan rally, which results into, you know, the lynching of several people in the shantytown that attacks Scarlett O'Hara when she, you know, travels through the forest and stuff like that. This is more of a melodrama where, you know, the on and off relationship between Butler and O'Hara becomes a more significant part of the movie. And I will say that Scarlett and Butler has fantastic toxic chemistry together, but it is also 2 hours that absolutely crawls by, and there is just so many times I can see how them being assholes to each other before I think, will this ever end? We also have a couple of absolutely mortal sequences in this section of the movie, you know, when Clark Gable is carrying Vivien Leigh up the staircase, and sequences like that. And, you know, the argument that ensues in the end of the movie is absolutely amazing, ending with the immortal line, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." But here comes the problem. After almost 4 hours in the company of these characters, we are then treated to what I would consider almost like a cliffhanger, almost like an inconclusive ending to this movie. And I said, what? This is what we get after having spent almost 4 hours with these 2 characters that I think really deserve each other, because if they are together, they cannot harm anybody of the, you know, general public outside of Tara. But here's the thing. This is an absolute stone cold classic, and I do understand the criticism that this movie has, and I do understand how they minimalize the thing with the slavery and, you know, the cause of the war, and maybe this is the root of the entirety of the, you know, lost cause legend that arose after the Civil War and stuff like that. And I will say this movie is very, very, you know, leaning towards the South, but it is also a movie told from the South perspective. And this is probably what many of them felt when it came to, you know, the aftermath, when it came to the Civil War and stuff like that. And the so-called carpetbaggers that showed up after the war were not just disliked, they were downright hated. And we also have to talk a little bit about, you know, Pork and Mammy and Prissy, the house servants that Scarlett O'Hara has. You can say that they are not really, you know, fleshed out characters. They're more like big children. I think these characters are probably some of the reasons why people has an axe to grind with this movie, because, well, they are stereotypical, and I can understand the criticism, and they aren't very well written, but I think that, you know, the people who plays them are pretty good, and I was interested to see what was going to happen to them, and, you know, they had characters I did care about. But there's also this thing that they're talking about, you know, are you content with being a slave and stuff like that, and I'm not going to say that there were no slaves in America during this time who wasn't treated well by, you know, their owners, and that they even had, you know, respect for the slaves, but they are still property, and it is no way around it. They really don't treat the slavery as a big thing in this movie, but I'm not going to talk about that anymore. But I will just say this, that the sometimes a little bit questionable way that they treat history and historical context, I have to put that aside, because that is not what the purpose of this movie is. It is more of a, you know, family chronicle and a big melodrama and a big soap opera. And when it comes to how this movie looks and how this movie feels and the spectacle of the thing, I have to applaud the movie because it is absolutely astonishing. And some of the sequences, as I said, are absolutely immortal. And if you can look past some of the more questionable and poorly, dated things in the movie, there is some fantastic things to discover here. But this is also a movie that goes on for far too long with characters I am having a big difficulty of finding any sympathy for. The acting is fantastic, the writing is stupendous, and the cinematography is absolutely flawless. David O. Selznick actually, I think, worn out 4 directors to complete this movie. It is one of the most monumental and spectacular movies that Hollywood has done up until this point. It is so big that the title of the movie has to be dragged across the screen, which takes several, 10 seconds maybe, because it is such a big title, because this movie is so goddamn big. Now, I should also say this, that there are no battle sequences in this movie, so the entirety of the Civil War is just lived through the civilian population in the South. We don't really see Sherman's decision of clobbering Atlanta, or we don't get to see the Battle of Gettysburg and stuff like that. I was a little bit disappointed about that when I saw the movie the first time. When I rewatched the movie, I was prepared for it, so I could take that into account. I do recommend this movie. This movie is a bit too long for me. The movie has moments that drag considerably, and we also have, as I said, a bunch of characters that is difficult to care about. But I do like that we have a big tapestry of characters, and it feels like a big, family chronicle. That was a nice little touch that they gave us. It is a movie that you should see at least one time to make your own mind up whether or not it is good or not. Vivien Leigh is of course the standout performance, and it is a character that will stay with you for quite a long time. Love her or hate her, she doesn't take shit from anybody. That is one thing that is absolutely for sure. I do have a soft spot for these big, epic, spectacular movies, but I mostly like big movies such as Lawrence of Arabia, or The Bridge on the River Kwai, or El Cid, or Spartacus and Barry Lyndon and movies like that. If they would have had big battles, would I have liked this movie more? Maybe, but that is not what type of a movie this is. This is more of a family chronicle, and it is a tale of the South that disappeared after the Civil War for good or for bad, mostly for good, I think. And maybe the movie tells more about the time of when it was made rather than the time it's portraying. Now, I'm not an expert when it comes to American history, but I don't think it is a very historically accurate movie. But it is an experience, and you don't quite know where things are going to go next. And Scarlett O'Hara's character arc is a quite fascinating one, even though I thought still that they could have had a better ending and more conclusive ending. But maybe that's just me. Maybe that is how the book ends. I've never read the book and probably never going to do that either, but nevertheless, I think it is a good movie. It has lots of flaws to it, but the sets, the costume and the atmosphere that they build throughout the movie is something that will stay with you for quite a while. I'm probably never going to watch this one again. Now I've seen it, and now I have decided what I think about it. Good or bad, this is a movie that you will not forget because it is that damn big. Gone with the Wind is fascinating. It's big and it is a good movie. I give this movie 57 points. There are people who absolutely hate this movie for a variety of reasons, and I can understand why. There are people who think that this is an absolute masterpiece, and I can understand where they're coming from too. But to me, it's a little bit too long, and some of the characters are simply a little bit too difficult to sympathize with. And we also have the entirety of the pace of this movie, because it is not a fast-paced movie, and also 4 hours is a long time to be trapped with these characters, and sometimes you felt the length of this movie. But still, Gone with the Wind is an immortal classic. Good or bad, love it or hate it, it is a movie that has a tremendous impact and will probably continue to be like that for years to come. If you've never seen it, do see it, give it a chance, and then afterwards you can say this movie sucks or this movie was fucking great. I land somewhere right down the middle. So what do you think about Gone with the Wind? Comment below, and I'll see you next time from, well, so-and-so reviewing, well, such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.